This is Creepy and Geeky, a part of the Morbidly Beautiful Podcast Network. Welcome to Creepy and Geeky. I'm your host, Robert, and on today's episode, we're beginning Phase 3 of the MCU with a look at Captain America: Civil War. Joining me today is Olly Dyche, a film critic and journalist from the UK. Welcome to the show, Olly.
Oh, thank you for having me, Rob. Pleasure being here. Pleasure talking to you, especially about Civil War, and I can't wait to get into it.
Yeah. This is this is the first official movie of Phase 3 of the MCU, and it's kind of like Avengers 2.5.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
so I like to think that part of the reason they did this is that um they knew that Age of Ultron wasn't going the direction they kind of wanted it to, or they're kind of like making up for how um Age of Ultron kind of fumbled things because they did too much of let's move things, let's point things towards the next stuff instead of telling like just a compelling movie on its own. And
yeah. No, yeah,
yeah,
I totally get it, man. I mean, looking back at the time, Age of Ultron just didn't hit the same as Avengers Assemble was.
right.
Avengers Assemble, fantastic movie. We don't need to get into that. But looking back at it now, obviously a few years later, Age of Ultron isn't isn't that bad. And I know it does get a lot of bad stick, and I know we're not here to talk about Age of Ultron,
Right.
but I don't think it's as bad as what people say it is. At the time, yeah, it was very disappointing. They tried to pull a lot of hairs, tried to push into the future, introduce
Right.
Wanda, introduce Quicksilver, and their intros weren't the best. They're great characters now, except Quicksilver, he's spoiler dead.
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen it by now, which I hope you will if you're a fan of the MCU, but I really enjoy it looking back at it. I've seen it a few times since, and it's not as bad as people give it shtick for.
No, it does a good job at it does a fair job at
Yeah,
what it's trying to do. The problem that I have with it, and then I talk about this in the previous episode, is that Ultron should have been like a villain that kept popping up. That you defeat him for now and that he'll eventually come back. Which is how he is,
yeah,
which is how most villains in the comic books are. Um, you take them out for a little bit and then they come back. And that's even with Ultron, like he should rebuild, at some point, like his code probably, if they're smart, they'll rebuild him at some point and have him come back. But they just don't do stuff like that in the movies. And I kind of understand that, comic books have a ton of villains they can choose from. So they can afford to, kill off a villain and not worry about bringing him back anytime soon. Um, so
yeah.
yeah, so I mean, I think it's fine the way they did it, but again, I think that he is such a good enough villain that we could have had him return or at least pop up here and there rather than being like he should have been kind of a villain that popped up kind of like Thanos where but even Thanos should have been used better throughout
Mm.
these phases as well where he just kind of only appears in end credits and stuff. It just I don't know. I think they should do a better job with these mega villains that they build up. Um so
Oh yeah, I definitely get it. I think they're going to try and do that with Kang the Conqueror now, obviously
yeah.
because of the multiverse stuff. So I'm enjoying the seeds of that a little bit. But yeah, James Spader just really sold the movie to me, to be honest. I
Oh,
don't
he's so
think
good.
Ultron was as great as a villain without James Spader. That's the only issue I have. But just
Right.
I don't care. James Spader is such he's chewing up every piece of scenery he's got. Anyway,
Right.
enough about Age of Ultron. Sorry.
Yeah. No, but I mean, we have to talk about that to get to Civil War because because the Avengers really kind of come together in Age of Ultron. They kind of break apart a little bit, but then they come
Yeah,
together to make sure they defeat Ultron. They realize at the end of that that they are kind of fractured. They're not they're not necessarily friends. They don't all have the same ideals. But they know that they can come together as this team to stop whoever they need to stop. And in Civil War, it's a little weird because I think that Marvel has kind of rushed through things that should have taken a little bit longer to kind of lay down some of these beats. I mean, there's literally one movie between Ultron and Civil War, and that's just Ant-Man. Um,
Yeah.
and so there's no groundwork being laid. I do think Civil War is an excellent movie. It's one of the best. But it's it just feels like everything gets rushed so quickly. And then the fracturing of everything just happens so fast that and again, comic books have years where they can lay out stuff, month by month and everything. And I get that. And I get that with movies, they don't have that much time, but I feel like they could have laid a little bit more of that through some other stuff rather than fracturing them so fast like they do with just this movie. And then there's nothing in between there and Infinity War to kind of talk about anything. And so I feel like they could have, stretched it a little bit farther before they got to that point. But they didn't, but it still made a good movie.
Well, yeah, I think Civil War is a fantastic movie on its own. And any given day, it's between me at Civil War, Endgame, Winter Soldier, and Infinity War as the best. Any given day, no matter just whatever I fancy that day. But I think what you're going on about not having like obviously Ultron, Civil War, not having a long enough lead time. I totally get that, and that's I think the problem we're seeing now with the MCU in its current state. Like, look at Secret Invasion. That's a
Yeah.
whole comic run. And we got
Yeah.
itty bitty series with 6 episodes. And I've got to admit, I've only watched the first episode. I just couldn't get into it as much as the comics. I've heard all about the comics, how it's all superheroes like Iron Man,
Yeah.
Captain America, all Skrulls, and that's such an awesome idea. But they
Oh,
didn't
the
tackle
comic
that in
book is
Secret
excellent.
Invasion.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I do want to check it out one day. I really do. But after the show Secret Invasion, yeah, the MCU is just in a strange state at the moment. And watching Civil
It
War again the
is.
other day, it just gave me so much nostalgia of going like, oh my God, that what a time that was. What a time
Right.
to be alive during that current state of the MCU with Civil War, Ultron, Avengers Assemble, Infinity War, and all those movies. And it feels surreal looking back at it now, to be honest. It feels like a fever dream.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, it's just like nowadays we take it for granted, especially with all the multiversal shenanigans and everything else.
Yeah.
We really are taking it for granted just how much that they are doing still to keep it alive and to, and they're gonna stumble. I get it. Like,
Mm.
don't get me wrong. I watched all of Secret Invasion. It wasn't the greatest thing. I'm hoping that the things that have that by the end of it, there's things that are going on that I think will hopefully seed into the future um, of the MCU, and that we'll get the consequences of these events,
Yeah.
um, which will be good though. Like, because it's kind of what you wanted with like the Winter Soldier, the fall of Shield and the fall of Hydra and stuff like that. You kind of get pieces of that little by little because they reference it in the beginning of Age of Ultron with
Yes. Yeah.
that, and then we get the consequences of it in this one too in the beginning with Rumlow, um and his crew taking on trying to get this poison or
Yeah.
pathogen or
Like this
whatever it is.
nerve gas
Yeah.
or something, like some chemical anyway. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you get these seeds that, get, take root later on, which is great. And, a lot of this stuff, the whole thing with Winter Soldier and stuff. And this is what's interesting too, because you said that, the ones that you like the most are Winter Soldier, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And they're all the
Mm.
ones written by Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, and directed by the Russo brothers.
I know,
And so
yeah.
those are those are all the, and this is what I said earlier in my Winter Soldier episode too, is that realistically Winter Soldier starts to lay the blueprint for what becomes of the MCU moving forward. That and Guardians of the Galaxy. Those two movies in
Yes.
combination kind of made Feige and everybody else involved kind of focus and go, okay, so we've got the kind of more grounded militaristic side of stuff, Captain America's stuff, and then we've got the more fantastical stuff with the Guardians of the Galaxy, and where they kind of go from there with Doctor Strange and a lot of the weird stuff, and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
evolving Thor and Thor Ragnarok and everything. And so we get the weird kind of cosmic weird stuff, and then we get the grounded stuff with Captain America, Ant-Man, and Black Panther. And Black Panther kind of goes both sides on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so, and that's why I think is great though, and that's what's kind of the hallmark of Marvel comic books in general. And so I think that, that Winter Soldier and all that kind of laid that blueprint, and that's where I think they saw how good Winter Soldier was, and then they saw how just kind of okay Age of Ultron was, and that's when they were
Mm.
like, okay, well, we're giving him Civil War, we're giving the Russo brothers Civil War, and we just want to make this a another Avengers movie in a way,
Yeah.
um,
Yes.
and build up to the next one. So,
Mm.
especially since again, it's literally two movies from the last Avengers movie. So
Mm.
they just kind of were like, let's kind of combine, sure, let's move Captain America and the Winter Soldier's story forward a bit, but let's push it together with what's going on with the Avengers as a whole. So,
Yeah, 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 definitely. Like, what point did you join into the MCU? Were you there from the start, or was it a
oh,
little
I
bit
was there
later
from
on?
the very start.
Yeah, I was there from the start. How old was I? 2008.
Yeah.
I was only 7
Oh my
when it
God.
first
Okay.
started. So sorry about that to put it into terms like that. But yeah, I was only 7. I was in from it from the start, but
I
I
was
only
34.
started to bit of different age gaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Just a little bit.
just a tad, only a few years. Yeah, I was 7, but I didn't start loving it and appreciating it until I think it was either Avengers Assemble or Guardians of the Galaxy. I know they're 2 years apart between them.
Right.
But I think that's when I started to really adore the MCU and think, okay, this could go into some great avenues, and I'd love to see, I mean, eventually see Spider-Man one day, which we do in Civil War. When I saw that trailer, I lost my
Mm-hmm.
mind. I just fell to the ground, and like I just did what Soups did and just screamed at the camera. Um, but no, it just the MCU back then was such a magical place. It was just
Oh yeah.
so fantastic. And I do love the movies now. Guardians of the Galaxy 3, I absolutely adored that. Shang-Chi, No Way Home. There are a few not so great ones in there, but we just won't talk about them. Even the series like WandaVision, Loki, I enjoyed What If, a little bit controversial, but I enjoyed that. It was like sort of a Saturday morning cartoon, and I really
Yeah.
dug that. But then there are other shows like Secret Invasion, which aren't great, like you said. Um, but I just because of the multiverse stuff, it's very difficult to judge the current state of the MCU, especially if everyone feeling superhero fatigue. But rewatching
Right.
Civil War, I just had such nostalgia for it, and I just wish we could one day hopefully get back to that time. It just feels so minuscule and on such a smaller scale back then, and back then it just felt huge and larger than life before Infinity War. Seeing
Right.
Spider-Man, Iron Man, Captain America, Hawkeye, uh, Scarlet Witch, or Wanda Maximoff as she was known now, Vision, fight together. Back then, that was such a monumental moment. But looking back now, it just feels like such a small part of the MCU.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's definitely and that's what's funny about it too, is like it's supposed to be a Captain America movie, but it's a Captain America movie guest starring all the Avengers.
Yeah.
And so we get bigger stakes, and again, it does lead to basically the rest of what happens in phase three of
Mm,
all these Avengers just being kind of apart. And this is what's interesting too. I found that I mentioned it before that in Iron Man 3 that Iron Man 3 was the beginning of phase 2. And so by the beginning of phase 2, we'd already told Iron Man's story like in his
mm,
individual movies. He's done already. Now at the beginning of
yeah,
phase 3, we're done with Captain America's story basically, other than, him popping up in the next two Avengers movies. Like that's the only other time we see him. He doesn't really pop up in anything else. Um and so it's it's a little odd to get these completed storylines sort of, until
mm,
until the end of Endgame. So, it's interesting to get these so quickly. I feel like they're quick, but like, in
yeah,
retrospect, they feel quick. But, in terms of the years between, it wasn't really that fast. But, now looking back on
yeah,
it, you could just kind of put them all together and they seem really quick. Um, but yeah, it's interesting to watch these in retrospect for sure. And
yeah,
just,
definitely.
kind of try to put them in the context of when they came out, and all that. And I do want to put this into context, and compare it to the comic book series as well, because the there was a comic book series, a mini series called Civil War,
Mm,
and it involved this fracturing of the heroes in this way, and this difference between Captain America and Iron Man. That was the main um, disagreement in the comic books as well. So
yeah.
in the comic books, it starts off a lot differently. Um, in the comic books, there's this team of heroes that are mostly teenagers, called the New Warriors. And
Mm,
this version of the New Warriors, it's like the third or fourth version of them. And it has some of the original members in it, but this version has a reality show. And so they've got a camera crew and that follows them and follows their adventures and everything. Well, they confront this villain who's called Nitro. And Nitro, his ability is to basically explode himself, and then reform. So he can
mm,
explode himself, and basically he causes a massive explosion. Well, they see him, they fight him. Well, unfortunately, they fight him right next to a school. And he explodes himself right like next to a bus or something, and it explodes and kills a bunch of kids, and that sets off a national debate about teenage heroes, and
mm,
whether superpowered teenagers should become heroes, should they get training, all this stuff. And it's very much in sync with what ends up with Civil
mm,
War in a way too. The consequences of your actions, of people who um aren't controlled. They're not being directed, and they're just doing their own thing, because they think that what they're doing is right. um
yeah.
so Iron Man at the time, could be wrong, but I think Iron Man at the time was like the Secretary of Defense, for the government. Tony Stark was. And at this point, I believe everybody knew he was Iron Man. There's In the comic books, people still had secret identities for quite a while. And in the movies, they kind of went away from that very early on. In the very first Iron Man movie, they were supposed to continue to have secret identities, but because
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr. did his little ad lib of "I am Iron Man," and they went, you know what, we'll keep that in. That kind of refocused them and just said, you know what, nobody's going to have secret identities except for somebody like Spider
That's good.
Man.
Yeah, that's good. It's just Spider-Man for the
Yeah,
majority until it obviously got leaked in Far From Home slash No Way Home. But
right.
yeah, thinking
Well,
about it now,
and
we all
that's
know.
what's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, that's what's interesting with the Civil War comic books too. Spider-Man is at the time, kind of Peter Parker is kind of assisting Tony. Like he becomes like Tony becomes a mentor to Peter Parker, and he convinces him to unmask on camera for everybody. and
Uh-huh.
for like, and to prove like, and to say, yes, heroes need to be controlled, and this is what I believe in this so much, I'm going to unmask. And he does that, and it causes problems in his life, of course. And it changes things for him. Eventually he realizes the error of that, and goes and sides with Captain America. And that's the thing. Tony believes wholeheartedly in this superhuman registration, and tries to convince the other heroes. Cap isn't having it, because Cap is Cap and believes that you shouldn't be restricting anybody's freedoms and whatnot, and that it's a slippery slope, and just like he says in the movie, that everybody's got agendas, and if we have to be following somebody else's agenda at this point, that we don't agree with, that's not cool. So it's they both have good arguments, and neither one of them is wrong, neither one of them is right in the end.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
and that carries over into the movie. So I think that it's interesting that they took the core of this, and this is what the MCU does really well, is they take the core of an idea of what this is, and then modifies it to the movie universe. And by and large, they've done really good with this, Secret Invasion notwithstanding. Um,
Yeah.
because I think Secret Invasion could have been done a lot better. Um, but they've been doing a pretty decent job at taking these storylines, modifying them for film, and making them different and interesting in their own ways.
Yeah, it's like it gives them their own original and fresh take. The only issue that I have with that is the universe numbers. It's 616 as well, isn't it? The comics and the movies
it's
is six one
it's
six.
not supposed to be. The
No,
movie
exactly.
universe is 199999.
Yeah.
And me and Iman Vellani will fight that. She has more power than I do on that
Yeah.
one, but
Well,
she
I'm
actually
back in
gets
your
in
corner.
Feige's face on that one.
Yeah. No, I agree with Miss Marvel herself.
616, yes, six one
Yeah.
six is the Marvel universe, the comic book universe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
When I first heard that in the MCU, when was it? Oh, it's Kevin Feige or someone that said it, and then we heard it in Doctor Strange or something. And
yeah,
then I just sort of sat there and gone, hold on a minute, no, it's not.
I almost
Can
yelled at
we
the
can we
screen. I
just
was like, no, it's not.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
that's
so I'm
that. No,
with
no, no.
both you and Imam Vellani. So I'm back in both your corners. So I'll fight to the
Good,
death
good.
on it.
There you go. But yeah, no, this one starts very very similar. Somebody died in Sokovia, makes Tony feel bad. Um, and
Yeah,
he agrees, and he agrees with the Sokovia Accords because of that mom, give it a
yeah,
face to it, and it's interesting because I do think that this is a good follow up to Age of Ultron in a way, because Age of Ultron made Tony confront his hubris in a
yeah,
way he hadn't really done before. And then this mother telling the story of her son dying because of the actions of Ultron and the Avengers, that it puts a face on something that he could put some distance on before. And so it but the irony is not lost that he then recruits a 15-year-old kid to his side to fight for
yeah,
him. So
yeah.
Tony still has issues.
Mm. But you can argue that he is pretty much invulnerable. But yeah, he's
Yeah.
still 15 and he's still in college, so still in school. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, it's still again not the best decision making
yeah,
on Tony's part,
yeah.
but Tony will Tony. And
You can't argue with Tony Stark, man.
yeah,
I mean, if we've learned anything from the movies, Tony Stark's Tony Stark, and he did sacrifice himself for the universe. So
he
it's
did.
yeah.
No,
So
and
you
I like
can't.
I and here's the thing. I will fight to my dying day that Robert Downey Jr. was from the very beginning the perfect Tony Stark. As soon as he got
Oh,
cast, I was like, hell yeah. I was like, I had no reservations. As soon as they said Robert Downey Jr. had been cast, I was like, oh, he's perfect. I've never been a huge Robert Downey Jr. fan up until the MCU. Well,
Yeah,
that's not true. I did like him in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang before that. Um,
yeah.
but then from that point on, I was just like I was Team Downey. So, but
Oh,
yeah, he's just so perfect in the role, and he plays every aspect of him well. The shitty, like overbearing, like childish rich dude, and then the tortured, haunted, version as well. So
he's one of them actors that are just born to play the role, and RDJ is probably the best of the best in terms of that. He embodies Tony Stark with such with just perfect. He's just perfect in the role, and I and nobody could see anybody else in the role as Tony Stark, nor do we want to.
right, yeah, exactly. So, we've already mentioned that, Spider-Man obviously appears in this. This is his first appearance in the MCU, and that was a huge deal because Spider-Man, of
Yeah,
course, is owned by, or his rights are currently owned by Sony, and have been since before his first movie came out, and that was a
yeah,
consequence of at the time Marvel was going bankrupt. They sold a bunch of their film rights to help save them from bankruptcy.
yeah,
And they have since reacquired pretty much every film right that they had sold except for Spider-Man and Spider-Man associated characters.
yeah.
um
I would say I wish Sony just let it go, but then again, the Spider-Verse franchise is just too good. I I want them to
I
stick with that. When it's done, sell it. Just sell it, Sony. You're done.
right.
Venom's not great. Let's not beat around the bush. Venom's not great. And I'm not excited for Craven the Hunter, nor El Diablo, a movie nobody really asked for.
Craven is the only one that I've been mildly interested in. I'm not a big enough fan of Venom to have even watched
Yeah,
the movie. And I don't like I've never been a fan of Morbius, the character, nor am I a fan of Jared Leto. So it's just like that movie itself is one that I'm like, I will eventually watch for the podcast, but
yeah,
it's gonna be a while before I get there.
yeah. I generally forgot Morbius came out. I forgot that movie existed. As bad as it was, I
Yeah.
for a minute it just went from my brain and I completely forgot. But Craven the
Now,
Hunter, watching the trailer, I am a bit intrigued into the R-rated mature side of it, but
yes.
that's it. And I do like Aaron Taylor Johnson. I do
Aaron
like
Taylor
him. I loved him in
Johnson,
Bullet
yeah.
Train. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's great. I love the bloke.
Yeah, no, he's really good. I've enjoyed him since of course Kick Ass. And so
Yeah. Don't
it's
forget
nice to see
Angus
him
Thongs
popping up.
and Perfect Snogging. That was his first movie ever popped up in the UK. But yeah, yeah,
It's
Kick
funny.
Ass, he was great. He did kick
Yeah.
ass.
Yeah, so he's so it'll be interesting to see those movies, but yeah, I would be obviously what Marvel has done with Spider-Man and Tom Holland. Tom Holland is my favorite Spider-Man of all time. People can come at me all they want, but he's my favorite so
No,
far.
I agree. I
um
agree with you on that. I do agree. I do love Andrew Garfield, and seeing them in No Way Home again, like
oh
everybody, I
yeah.
lost my mind. But Andrew Garfield, he just lost it on the Peter Parker aspect, and that's not his fault. That was the
No.
direction and the writing. But Tom Holland is such a perfect. Even Stanley himself said that Tom Holland was a perfect Peter Parker.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that, Toby Maguire is a good actor. I like him a lot. He's a good actor. He
Mm.
never fit Peter Parker for me. He never
Yeah,
fit Spider-Man for me either. Like, and
yeah,
Kirsten Dunst, again, I like her as an actress. She was not Mary Jane to me. So it was
no,
really hard in those movies to watch them because I was just like, these are not like, and I get it. I shouldn't put my stuff into that, but at the same time, they didn't pull it off for me. And so
yeah.
that was itself very hard. Now, Andrew Garfield, like you said, Andrew Garfield did a great job as
Mm.
Spider-Man. When he's in the
Yeah.
costume, he's got the look down, he's tall and skinny. He's,
Mm.
and you don't need to be tall. Obviously, Tom Holland's not
Yeah.
tall, but Tom Holland's got that gymnast body where it's like thin, and
Yeah,
so Tobey Maguire was too bulky to me.
yeah,
um
yeah,
he was short, but he was bulky, he was stocky,
yeah,
and so it never really rang true for me. And he was never really funny, and that was something that Andrew
yeah,
Garfield and Tom Holland have both brought into it. And part of that's the writing, but also part of it's the
mm,
performance.
yeah,
And so it just the Maguire, the Sam Raimi movies, as much as I'm a huge Sam Raimi fan, and I
yeah,
like aspects of the movies. I think Willem Dafoe is great as Green Goblin.
yeah.
I
Mhm.
think the costume shit. But
Yeah,
uh
yeah,
but
I
then
agree.
but and then Alfred Molina as Doc Ock, is perfect,
Mm,
and so getting to see them come back and everything for No Way Home was like so good. Um,
yeah,
everything about No Way Home is so good, but we're
yeah,
getting off topic. But anyway, so Spider-Man's first appearance. So
yeah,
it's great that the Sony they finally worked out a deal to bring Spider-Man into the MCU. It
mm,
was a long time coming, and I'm so glad they did it because it works so perfectly. And that's kind of getting back on track with that was that because Tom Holland was so good at it that
mm,
he he just brought so much to that character that hadn't been there before. And tying it all into the MCU was just like, I don't know, it's just like chef's kiss right there. So
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, his first appearance was just incredible. Like I said, seeing him in the trailer, I never expected it because, I mean, back then the MCU was huge to me and to the fandom, but to casual audiences before Civil War, it wasn't really as popular. I think it was Guardians of the Galaxy that really put it into the world and for everyone else other than me, you, the fandom to enjoy. And seeing
right.
Spider-Man, I mean, thinking now, going, why wouldn't you want Spider-Man to pop up in the MCU? You'll get profits from it, Sony. Why wouldn't you? But back then, it wasn't, at least to me, wasn't as huge of a success as it is today.
Right.
But
Yeah.
that might be just me, maybe because again, I was quite young in that time. But I didn't. It wasn't until like Guardians of the Galaxy and Civil War where it started raking in the big bucks, at least from what I saw.
Well, so the first Avengers movie did really well. Um,
Mm,
like it was probably the biggest one up to that time.
yeah.
But the first two phases were kind of uneven.
Mm,
They were wildly uneven. And I think that they find their footing with Winter Soldier,
yeah.
and Guardians. And, it still kind of goes up and down a little bit. Ant-Man didn't do that great
Mm,
in terms of, money. I mean, it did fine. It was
yeah.
profitable. Like they all do very well. None of them have been
Yeah.
losers at all.
No.
But they go up and down. And that's what's interesting today is that, people are like, oh, they didn't do so great at the box office. It's like, but they don't have to. Like
Yeah.
people, sure, they need to stop spending as much as they are spending on these movies.
Yeah.
Um, because they're spending way too much. But, you know, but they don't have to make $1 billion each time for Marvel to continue to make these. I think
But
Marvel is playing a very long game with these.
yeah.
And Disney's letting them do that because they know it's a long game. They know that
Yeah.
they have to kind of play these out as long as possible. And
Yeah.
Kevin
But
Feige has a vision, and
mm,
it's working. So even when a show or a movie doesn't work fully, like say the Eternals or Secret Invasion or something like that, that when they don't work, they still do well. They're still, and
yeah.
even still, they're still better than a lot of things. Even though Secret Invasion is disappointing, the show itself is still fantastic in many ways.
Yeah.
Um,
I
when you
think
do
it's
get a
just
chance to watch it, the getting Nick Fury as much as we do in this and getting these long stretches, and I'm sure you've heard of it, he gives
yeah.
long stretches of conversation with him and other people that
Mm,
are just fantastic. And it
yeah.
just adds so much to the character itself. So
Again, I think it's the MCU sort of shooting themselves in the foot with you have to put well, you don't have to, but everybody puts these shows and movies in context of other movies in the MCU. Your Guardians of the
Right.
Galaxy, your Avengers, your Captain America movies, your Spider-Man movies, and they look at that and compare, which everybody does, even I myself do, which
Hmm.
I shouldn't do. I should look at it as a project. But even Secret Invasion, I think why more people are so pissed off about the show is its source material. And I know that Kevin Feige has got a plan for this. It's gonna be great. I can imagine so. I have faith
Right.
in the bloke. I have done since the start. He's delivered every single time. But I think just at the moment, I mean, Secret Invasion might have an Age of Ultron moment where it's disappointing now, but in 10 years' time, it's one of the most important series out
Yeah.
of all of them. So
Yeah.
who knows?
And I really do think that that's what's they laid some groundwork in this that is going to come later, and then we're all going to look
Mm,
back on that and go, oh, okay. You know, I'm
yeah,
hoping anyway.
yeah,
I'm hoping, fingers crossed, that
yeah,
comes to pass. But
yeah, yeah.
because again, sometimes they play that long game. There are things that they plant a seed very early on in a movie that has no consequence for a long time, and then years down the road, boom, there we go. There it is.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's such a nice
um,
payoff though when they do that, isn't it?
oh yeah,
So
it
I
yeah,
do kind of like it, and I know all the main story beats of Secret Invasion. I've talked to people about it. People have told me and what
yeah,
have you, but I just haven't got into the series yet. And probably in 10 years' time, I will come back and rewatch it.
right.
But for now, yeah, I just have no intention of checking it out. Sadly, I've never said that about any MCU project. I'm always there, no matter what it is. But just yeah,
Yeah. No, I understand. Yeah, I'm the same way. But getting back to Civil War.
yeah,
Was Spider-Man, yes, this is Spider-Man's first appearance, but this is also Black Panther's first appearance.
yes.
So this is it was interesting too because I was reading up on this a little bit, and Spider-Man was supposed to have a big role in this movie, and Black
Mm,
Panther's role was supposed to be fairly small because they didn't want to give him too much focus because they wanted to give him more focus in his own movie,
yeah.
which is understandable.
Well, yeah.
But what ended up happening was, while they were writing the script for this, that they weren't sure how much they were going to get to have of Spider-Man, and so while rewriting it, they brought Spider-Man's role way down and beefed up Black Panther's. And then by the time they got the rights to Spider-Man, they just were already too far into the script that they were just like, okay, well, we won't worry about that now. We'll just keep Black Panther where it's at. Which I think was
Well,
the
it was a
better choice.
choice. Yeah, I was going
Yeah,
to say it's a choice well made because I think delving into Spider-Man, people would have just associated it with like a Spider-Man movie, but with Black
right,
Panther, it's more personal. And even back then, not many people had the efficiency to Black Panther as he does now, as the moniker does now.
right.
So I really enjoyed Black Panther in Civil War. It's one of my
Oh
favorite.
yeah,
I mean, Chadwick Boseman is just incredible in the role. Again, going
so
to
good.
RDJ being perfect casting, the MCU is just fantastic with its casting, and Chadwick Boseman is another great example.
Yeah, it's rare that I've ever thought that they've made a bad casting choice. Like everybody
Mm,
who they've cast in these roles has been pretty much perfect. I can't think of anybody offhand that has been terrible for the role that they've been in. Just
yeah, no,
everybody's
I
been so
agree.
good.
Yeah. Yeah, even the one-off villains, like Guy Pearce, I didn't really care
Oh
about
yeah.
his character, but he was great in the role, and I can't fault him for that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But yeah, it's this is an interesting bit because we get, at the time at the beginning of this movie, obviously T'Challa is not the Black Panther yet. His father is T'Chaka, is the king of Wakanda. He's the Black Panther at the time. And
Yeah,
he becomes the Black Panther through the course of this movie, and and the machinations of the big villain of this piece, which is Baron Zemo, uh,
yes,
and which so I get why they needed to change him, and I
hmm
get that doing so changed some stuff for the character. But I will admit that I was disappointed we didn't get him in his mask until Falcon and the
Yeah,
Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Which, to be fair, I'm glad they finally did it in that
yeah,
as well. So we got at least, it happened at least once. But
yeah,
yeah, it's a much different take on the character than he is in the comic books. In the comic books, he's the child of a like a Nazi character that Captain America fought back in World War II.
yeah,
Um, and in fact, is the his father is the person who's in the comic books who sent up a rocket that was supposed to, like a bomb that was supposed to go to America, and Cap and Bucky get on it, and uh, Cap jumps off, but Bucky gets stuck on it and can't get off,
yeah,
and it explodes in midair and kills Bucky, or so we think.
yeah.
Um,
Well, yeah,
so, but even in the comic books, he gets blasted free, and then eventually becomes the Winter Soldier in the comic books, and which led into the Winter Soldier movie.
yeah,
So it's interesting, sort of some of these ideas that these connections to these characters, they don't get played up on as much. Um,
yeah.
but we do have these interesting connections in this own movie itself, because we discover through the course of this movie, and Zemo finds out through the course of this movie, that the Winter Soldier is the person who killed Howard and Maria Stark.
Hmm.
And and what that does, because Tony can't separate the fact that he can't reconcile the fact that um Bucky was used. He was mind controlled. He was not the person who he is now without the mind control, or the person who he is deep in there. James Buchanan Barnes is
Yeah,
not the person who he was being controlled, and the person who killed his parents and everything. And so this is what fractures Cap and Iron Man in the end, and it's what's fractures the Avengers as a whole as well. That
yeah,
he can't reconcile that Captain America would stand by his friend,
yeah,
and not by him, and
yeah.
it's a tough choice.
You
you
see, you
know,
see both sides, don't you? Like with anything in
yeah,
the MCU, like you see both sides of the argument. Before we go on, are you Team Cap
yes.
or Team Iron Man?
So I'm always Team Cap.
Yes, yes. Yeah,
I just
I'm Team
I
Cap.
love I love Iron Man as a character. I love Tony Stark as a character. I love Robert Downey Jr.'s performance of it and everything.
Yeah.
But Captain America, when it comes down to things, he will always make the best choice in these instances, even if it's the hard choice. When I
Yeah.
first started reading comic books, um, and I started diving into them deeper as a kid. When Captain America was one of the first comic books I started reading, and at the time was when he literally gave up being Captain America. And John Walker became Captain America. That whole storyline in the comic books that ends up being a part of the Falcon and Winter Soldier storyline,
Yeah.
that was something that I came into comic books on. And so
Yeah.
it was literally Captain America just going, nope, I don't agree with you, because the government wanted to control him and say,
Yeah.
you only do what we say. And he was like, no, then I choose not to be Captain America anymore. And
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
thought that was a bold move, and that's what he does here. He's like, if I have to, like, at the end of this, Tony's saying that's not your shield. My dad made that. That's not your property. And Cap just goes, okay, and drops it,
Yeah.
because he's not defined by his shield. He's not
Yeah.
defined by his costume. And that's something that I think is interesting, that as we've gotten along, every movie he's had this moment where he's made this choice. In the first movie, he made the choice to go get those prisoners across enemy lines, even though he was told not to,
Yeah.
because he did what's right. He doesn't do
Yeah.
what he's being told. And in Winter Soldier, it's the same thing. He takes down Shield, even though Fury doesn't want to. Fury wants to save what Shield is. And he's like, you can't. You have to take it all down. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a choice. And in this one too, he's like, I can't save this friendship with Tony. as much as I want to, and if I can't be Captain America, that's fine. But I will continue the fight, and that's what he does in the comic books as well during the Civil War thing too. He chooses the side of freedom, the side of having the ability to choose what you want to do as a hero, and
Yeah,
having that as your right, as a person.
yeah.
And so that's why I will always be Team Cap, the side of freedom.
Yeah, well, I agree. I'm Team Cap wholeheartedly. No questions asked. He always makes the right choice. If I was in a room with Captain America, we couldn't make a decision. He just said, "I'm doing it." I'll just follow him. I won't question it. I'll
Right.
just walk out that door with it. I go, "Well, you're bound to do something right, aren't you, Steve?" So I'll follow him. But as much as I love Iron Man, as you were saying, as much as I love RDJ and how his story and his character arc has evolved and changed for the MCU, we've fallen in love with him to the point where everybody cried upon his death. And Iron Man, the team Iron Man is filled with some amazing characters. You've got
Oh yeah.
Vision, you've got Spider-Man, Black Panther, Black Widow, and as much as I love them characters, again, even based on characters alone, I think I'd rather go with Team Captain America without the sides of the battle, without Iron Man wanting to control the superheroes without causing
Right.
any damage, reducing collateral, and Captain America saying, no, we can't. We need to save whoever we have to save at whatever cost.
Right.
Putting that aside, I think I'd still go Team Cap. I love Ant-Man. I love Bucky. I love Scarlet Witch, Hawkeye, Falcon. I just love all of them as well. But yeah, Team Cap all the way. Not even thinking about it.
Exactly. Yeah. No, this is a great movie because it does make you make that choice, and
Mhm.
you got to come down on whatever side. And I understand, and I don't think that anybody that comes down on Tony's side is wrong either. Like
No, yeah,
that's ultimately where you come at it from, is that you have to make that choice for yourself. And that's what Captain America is saying. You don't have to, like, if you that's what you choose to do, that's your choice. If you want to choose
yeah,
to become, registered and everything, that's all fine. But you shouldn't have to. You shouldn't have to
yeah.
choose that, and you shouldn't be told that that's the only way you can be a hero. And
Well,
that's the
yeah,
only way you can save people.
like Captain America, even at the start says, I don't want to do this and walks away. It's Iron Man and the government that chase after Captain America and force him to fight.
Yeah.
Else he wouldn't have fought. He would just walk away. You do you, I'm doing me. Don't come after
Yeah.
me. I'm going to save lives, whatever it takes. And again, you can't fault people for going for Team Iron Man because I get it. I struggled at first, but again,
Yeah.
Team Cap always, no matter what choice he makes.
Yeah.
But you see both sides, and that's what is so great among the many things about Civil War.
Right. And I think there's a way to do this in like, if you think it out, there's a way to make this reconcile completely. So
Mm,
if people want heroes to be more responsible, and they should be,
yeah, oh
and
yeah,
that's the whole point of the registration in the first place, the Sokovia Accords. I keep saying registration because that's what it is in the comic books, but the Sokovia Accords, the whole point of the Sokovia Accords is that they want heroes to be registered and responsible, and you know under their thumb basically, and have to be controlled by them. They just can't go willy-nilly, which I get. You want to
yeah,
have some responsibility there. So the ideal should be in a way that, you know it's these heroes should get some kind of training. There should be some kind of, you know things that they, not necessarily, training, but like some kind of training, yes, in how to
yeah,
use their abilities before they go out and actually start helping people and doing stuff like that. Learn how to use your abilities. Use them by yourself. Use them in concert with each other. Practice, practice, practice. That's not a bad idea. Um, I'm a driver's ed instructor now, and that's what I tell my students. You need to get out and practice. You can't
yeah,
become a good driver until you get out and practice a lot. That's what you need to do. And so, um that's in general what people need to do. That's what training is
yeah,
all about. And so do that, and then get certified or licensed in some way, shape, or form that recognizes you as an official superhero of some sort. And then you also should
Yeah,
have, like, I don't know, insurance and stuff like that. All these
yeah,
little things
yeah.
that would the normal people have to do. Like, cops and firefighters, they have to do stuff. Now, to be fair, they're kind of, I don't want to get into all the, good and bad of all that. But they're licensed and insured in some ways to do what they do as well. They have
Mm.
consequences, sort of. And that they have rules and stuff that they have to abide by. And so I think, as heroes, there should sort of be something to that. So, in a real world scenario,
Yeah, yeah,
so I can
yeah.
see
But
that point of view, but I think so there's a way of doing that that doesn't let them run amok, but also isn't completely under the thumb of control. Like, they don't have to be directed. They can still go out and do what they need to do and go save people and do the things they need to do without having somebody go, no, you can't do that because that's, we don't agree with that. They're not an ally or something like that. And that was Cap's point was, you know what if we need to go someplace that the UN doesn't agree with? Well,
mm,
that's a bad idea. We still
yeah,
should go help people regardless of that. and
yeah.
and they already had this in the comic books as well. Even before this, the Avengers had a government liaison who told them what they could and couldn't do. And it was a whole mess. So
But as it
I
as it
always go
would
back to
be.
the comics. Yeah, yeah. So it's interesting to see these things happen again and again, in terms of stuff. But but this is how I think of it in the movie, in the movie aspect too. There's a way of doing it that wasn't quite the way they did it. And
Mm,
there was a compromise there that they could have made, but because the governments of the world were just, you know, caught up in, oh well, we need to stop these heroes from just being crazy, then,
yeah.
and that's what happens in the real world too, is people make decisions, and judgments on things, and don't take the time to really think through them. And that's what this movie shows.
Yeah, well, there's definitely a compromise between the two.
Yeah,
Um, Cap isn't wrong. Iron Man isn't wrong. If you just meet in the middle, we wouldn't have to fight in an airport. As much as
exactly.
I loved it, there'd be no fight and no movie. But
Right.
as a resolution,
Exactly. No, and it makes for a good movie. And I do think that this makes for a better Avengers movie than, honestly, the first two Avengers movies.
yeah,
This makes for a more interesting and fun movie in a lot of ways. We get a lot of the characters, little bits of storylines here and there. Um, we get Ant-Man, who only just had his movie before that. We get him back in this movie. And now we get him growing to giant man status. Um, and so, it's nice to see these characters, again, even if it is very soon after the last Avengers movie, it's still
yeah.
great to see them all together and in a movie, like I said, that I think is better than uh, Ultron in a lot of ways.
Oh, definitely. It's hands down better than Ultron. It's not even a debate. The Russo brothers have just smashed the MCU. Like I
Oh
said, my
yeah.
four favorite are Russo brothers movies.
Yeah.
So yeah, they're just fantastic. They understand the source material. They understand the story. They understand how to direct action and
Yeah.
superhero action. It just boils down to such fantastic movies from the two of them.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Hopefully
No,
they
and
come back for Secret Wars, but fingers crossed.
yeah, I don't know if they've got somebody. I thought they said that. Oh, I think it's just the writer.
Yeah,
So they've
I
got the
think
writer from
the Russo
the
brothers
writer
said
from
that's the only movie they'd come back to is Secret Wars. But so that in my head thought, yes, they're directing
Yeah.
Secret Wars, but they're not. There's nothing. There's no, I just want to say to your audience, there's no confirmation yet. It's just wishful thinking from me.
Yeah, no, I'd like to see them come back as well. Like,
Yeah.
I think that it would, give them a good opportunity. And honestly, Secret Wars is and all this multiversal shenanigans that we got going on is going to be the perfect avenue to bring back Robert Downey Jr. is Iron Man and Chris Evans is Captain America. So we make it,
Yeah,
they, just for little bits. I don't want them coming
yeah,
back fully because I do think that
yeah.
they deserve to, ride off into the sunset. But I would love to see
Mm.
multiversal versions of them come back. Just to get, just to have a little fun with the characters again.
Oh
So.
yeah, definitely. And by the rate we're going, we want Hugh Jackman back, we want Wesley Snipes back, Tobey Maguire, Andrew Garfield. It's going to be a 7 hour movie.
Right, right.
I
Hey,
mean, the Russo brothers can do it.
they have not fleshed out phase 6 yet, so there's
Yeah,
still a lot
yeah,
of unknown movies in that phase,
yeah.
so it'll be
Mm.
interesting to see what they pack into those. So,
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think this is a fantastic movie. I think that what they're still saying, and getting back into kind of a little bit of this, because this is the Captain America movie, and we're talking about the Winter Soldier as well, because it's continuing the Winter Soldier's storyline. So we get a little
Mm.
bit more of his past, a little bit more of what was going on with him and how he was controlled by Hydra. Um, which is good. I like seeing that, and I like seeing that this whole there was this whole program of them, and that you think throughout the whole movie that Zemo is going to go um, unfreeze these other Winter Soldiers to use them upon the governments of the world. And twist of all twists is no, he just wanted to kill them because he didn't want
Yeah.
any more of him out there.
Mm.
So uh,
I got to
because
admit, I love Zemo in this.
oh no,
He's not menacing. He's got no superpowers. He's
yeah.
I think I could defeat him. He's that he's that unintimidating, but
Right.
he uses the Avengers against one another in such a perfect way. His plan was methodically thought out, and it just he's one of the best villains, at least in my opinion, with Thanos and
Right. Well, they did say
Shang-Chi.
that they did say that too, that his plan really revolved on a lot of coincidence happening too.
Oh yeah, yeah,
And so
yeah,
it's just like, just things, him taking advantage of the possibilities of things
yeah,
happening. So it's just like, all right, that is kind of funny
yeah,
that, when it comes down to it,
yeah.
if anything just happened to go wrong, if they just sat and talked for just a little bit more, things might not have spiraled out of control like they did. But of course, it's a
Oh yeah,
comic book movie. This is what happens. I mean, people need to
yeah.
let that go. Yes, it's built on a lot of coincidence, but that's what makes it fun. Because it just
Oh yeah.
it did work. So,
Oh,
but yeah,
that's all
no,
that
I
matters at the end of the day. Yeah.
yeah, and no, and I agree. I think that Daniel Bruhl plays a great Zemo. I think that he's even better Zemo in Falcon and Winter Soldier. Um,
Yes.
and I will stand on that hill that Falcon Winter Soldier is a great show.
Oh no, I
Yeah.
agree. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
it. I mean, the flag smashers were the only thing that brought the series
Oh
down for
yeah.
me.
Yeah.
I liked and loved John. I loved and hated John Walker, but Wyatt Russell gave such a
Yes.
fantastic performance that I loved him so much. Seeing Julia Louis-Dreyfus turn up, that
Yes.
was amazing. And of course, seeing Bucky and Sam Wilson's characters fleshed out and their chemistry and relationship fleshed out a bit more
Yeah.
was great. And finally seeing Sam in that incredibly badass Captain America suit, it was just awesome.
Yes. I'm hoping they
It doesn't get the
modify it a
credit it
little
deserves.
bit. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
hoping they modify it a little bit because it's a little funky of a costume, but I think they will. I think they'll
yeah,
tone it back a little bit for the movie.
yeah,
But for the next Cap movie, which is great. I'm glad he's getting to be Captain America. I
yeah,
know it's going to cause a lot of issues with the more racist people in the world, but I don't
yeah.
care
I mean, it already has,
because
hasn't it? So
it already had. Well, it already
yeah,
did in the comic books because they already did this storyline in the comic books,
yeah,
and those racist people were already calling out, and it was even funnier too because in the comic books they addressed it.
mm,
Just as much as they addressed it in the Falcon and Winter Soldier movie as well,
yeah,
or the
yeah,
series. They addressed this, and because they know that people in the real world are going to hate it. And it's like, but
yeah,
tough, tough, this is
yeah,
what it is now, so
yeah. But I'm
it's
not going to change any political landscape by saying this, but they should just get over this shit.
Right?
I mean,
Absolutely.
just, Jesus Christ, just get over it.
Yeah,
He's a
times have
great
changed.
character.
Move on. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's 2023. Just shut up.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Agreed.
There we go.
It's
We've
just so
changed the
exhausting.
political landscape forever
There we
now.
go.
We are
There
the
we
pioneers. Yeah.
go. Yeah, yeah. No, let's hope this my small audience will help change
Well,
things
yeah,
for the
they
better.
will. They will. They will.
But yeah, no, I'm excited to see what comes in the future. I'm hoping we
Mm,
get more of a Zemo again in the future. We do have a
yeah.
Thunderbolts movie. I don't know if he's in it, but since he was one of the original
Yeah.
Thunderbolts, it would be
I
nice to
think
see
he
that.
was in the was it character art or was it a poster of some sort? I think he was in it, unless I've made that up. I might have just put him in there. I don't know.
I don't remember seeing him in it, but it's
Yeah,
possible
I
I
might have
missed
been wrong.
something.
Yeah. Hmm. Well, yeah, I'm sure he will pop up.
Yeah, I'm hoping he
I'm
does.
sure he will.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I've got my fingers crossed too because I loved
yeah,
his character. Winter Soldier, he was better in that in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So
yeah, yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so this is a fun movie. It's really good. It's got a lot of um stuff that, again, this does a better job at laying out stuff for the future than what Ultron did. This was
yes,
more organic in a lot of ways. I do think that the writers, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, have a better handle on that kind of universe building than others do. And it just shows from Winter Soldier to Civil War to Infinity War and Endgame, they had a handle on big groups. You cannot argue that those four movies, the movies that the Russo brothers did with those writers, you cannot argue that those are not some of the best movies of the MCU as a whole. Um,
oh, definitely. Whether they're your favorite or not, your favorite, whatever,
yeah,
that's different. It's that subjective.
exactly.
But objectively, Civil War, Winter Soldier, Infinity War, and Endgame are some of the best movies in the MCU, hands down.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, so it's in this movie, Civil War it's a fun movie. It's got stakes that reverberate throughout the rest of the next phase and beyond. And it's just really good. I enjoy it a lot. It's not one that I keep going back to,
Mm.
it's um but it's still really good. And when I
Yeah,
do go back to it, it's always like it's really good, and I'm always like, why don't I go back to this one more? um Winter Soldier is the one I always go back to the one more, but the that one just that one's more of a spy adventure, and it just feels breezier
yeah,
than this one does. Civil
yeah,
War, Civil War doesn't, Civil War has so much going on in it. It's definitely, um there's a ton going on. It's not
yes,
as exciting, super action, um
yeah,
uh spy thriller sort of thing. But it's so good on its own that and picks up the pieces and continues to throw them farther in, like I said. And it's just a great movie.
yeah. Like you said, just to echo your statement, it's a fun movie and one of my personal favorites. I could go any day watching Infinity War, Civil War, Winter Soldier,
Yeah,
or Endgame. And usually when I do go back to the MCU, which now isn't very often, I think because I'm oversaturated with all the content, I will
right.
go back to those three final Russo brothers movies: Civil War, Infinity War, Endgame. More so Infinity War, but that's just because that's just a ton of fun. You can switch off and just have a great time. Enjoy the visuals, enjoy the characters. But Civil War, I just have an absolute love for. I think the
Yeah,
characters were handled so perfectly. There are stakes, like you said, the political choices that you want to make. Are you on Team Cap? Are you on Team Iron Man? Just
yeah,
offers so much to the story. And again, it does. The stakes lead to so many choices at the end of the film that branch off into so many stories into the MCU. Like the start of Infinity War, the Avengers are broken up. Literally, like Mark Ruffalo, Bruce Banner says, like a boy band. They have just separated. They broke up. And
Right.
then in Endgame, it does make for a fantastic and emotional reunion.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Civil War, it's just one of my favorites, one of the most important, I'd argue, in the MCU. But looking back now, it's such on a small scale, but it's
Yeah.
just so much fun. I love Ant-Man. I think most of it is because I love Paul Rudd.
Oh
I
yeah.
adore Paul Rudd. He's so good in the role. He continues,
Oh,
even
he's
in Ant-Man and the
fantastic.
Wasp, Quantum Mania, I wasn't particularly a huge fan of, but Paul Rudd crushed it like always. So
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, Black Panther, Spider-Man making their first appearances, Baron Zemo being a fantastic villain, whilst he did give a better performance in Falcon the
Yeah.
Winter Soldier. I just loved his villainy in Civil War. So
Yeah.
honestly, it it's to me it's a near perfect movie. I have nothing to say against it. But that's just me. I mean,
Yeah.
I just love it.
No,
It's a ton of fun.
and it's the first movie of the phase three. And it
Mm.
literally just kind of like leaves the blueprint for everything to come afterward, because after this point
Yeah,
we get Black Panther's movie, we get Spider-Man's movie, we get,
yeah.
so much that just kind of, and then we get these first appearances of like Doctor Strange and Captain Marvel,
Mm.
and it just kind of leads into all this stuff that, just kind of coalesces by the end in Infinity War and Endgame. So it's a it's this perfect beginning of this Infinity Saga in a lot
Yeah.
in the last part of the Infinity Saga. And it's a great moment in time for that. So
Yeah, again,
yeah.
going back, it's just such a fantastic. I'll miss it. I just want to go back to that small one or two movies a year. There's just so much content going on now. As much as I appreciate it, I just can't keep up. That's the truth. I can't keep up with it. As much as I want to get into it, I've just got no time. So, yeah,
That's funny. Yeah, no, I'm still here for them all. I'm still going headstrong on everything, every show, every TV, every movie. Like I'm there for opening day. Um, but and for the most part, I'm still enjoying them all. I'm a
yeah,
long time Marvel comic book fan. I've been reading them since I was a kid. And so being able to see
yeah,
a lot of these um storylines that, yes, like I said, are modified for uh the movie universe, but getting to be able to see these even when they don't fully hit, like say Secret Invasion, that it's still fun to
mm,
see it and see what they're doing with it, and hoping that down the line there may be something to come of it, more so than maybe right now, and I'm trusting in the process
yeah,
that hopefully there will be something there. So,
yeah,
because
yeah. Again,
sometimes there is.
I'm not a Yeah, yeah, exactly. I'm not a comic boy,
Yeah.
but I have always wanted to get into the comics. But I look at the MCU as more movies. Obviously, I'm a film critic, so going into all that, I look at it as more movies. I know all the big storylines from the comics. I'm aware of it. I know all the characters, even characters that aren't introduced into the movies yet. I do know of them. I know their stories, their origins. I just haven't delved deep enough into the comics and read them to. I do want to jump into them, but I just again, the movies just keep coming and keep coming where they don't give me a. Oh, I want to read Secret Invasion. Oh, the series is already out. Okay, well, thanks for that, Marvel. Fargo. As much as I appreciate it.
Well, I think that what's nice though is that the shows and the movies aren't going anywhere, and the comic books aren't going anywhere. So you do have time. Just make it on your own
Mm,
time. There's no
yeah,
rush. And that's what's nice about it, is I don't think the
yeah.
Marvel universe is going to,
Mm.
like, I've seen people like sounding the death knell of after Secret Invasion. I'm like, that's not going to be the thing that's going to kill the MCU. Like,
No,
if something like the
yeah,
Eternals or Thor: The Dark World didn't kill it, then we're not going to get the one little TV show isn't going to kill it either. And so I think that
yeah.
it's going to
Let's
continue
just
for a
face
long
it.
time
It's not
coming.
going anywhere. It's
Right.
yeah, it's not going to
No,
die.
they still
It's
make a
not
lot of
going
money off
anywhere. The
these.
most they'll do is cut back on the content. That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a,
So
it'll be
yeah, I mean, I
fun.
don't want it to
I'm looking
stop. Don't
forward.
get me wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to whatever they come up with in the future. So I'm just, I'm here for the ride.
I am to I am here for the ride. I still adore their content. I am looking forward to the Marvels. I'm curious to
Oh
see
yeah.
how that plays out. Loki season two, I'm down for. I loved the first season, so
Oh
I'm
yeah.
there for Loki season two. It's just Secret Invasion was the only one, and I think it will only be. I will watch it. To be honest, I'm probably going to watch it next week. I think I've got a um, but at the moment, in my mind, there are other TV series that I'm just getting into. I need to finish their
Yeah.
season two. I've Succession, all that sort of stuff. TV shows that intrigue me more that I want to get into.
Oh yeah.
And thankfully, it's only 6 episodes, six Secret Invasion. So I will get to it one day. Don't worry about that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, it'll be there until you're ready. So, all right.
Well, exactly. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, do you have anything else you want to say about Civil War that we haven't already mentioned?
No, to be honest, no. It's just such a fantastic movie. I adore it, and yeah, that's it. Nothing that hasn't been said a million times before about Civil War.
I agree. All right. Why don't you let people know where they can find you online?
Yes, so I'm mostly write for a company called MovieWeb, but if you type my name in, Olly Dyche, that's Olly Dyche on Google, you'll most likely find my interviews, reviews, listicles, features, what have you. So yeah, that I'm on Twitter, Facebook, Threads now, which is not Twitter, X, ugh. Um, Facebook,
It'll always be
Threads,
Twitter to me.
Instagram. Oh, me too. Every time I see that X, I just want to throw it. I don't really use it that much anymore, but yeah, I am available on all pretty much every social media website. So yeah, be
All
grateful
right.
if you give me a follow and keep up with all my work. But yeah,
All right. Well, I appreciate you coming on today to talk Civil War.
thank you so much for having me. I've been looking forward to talking about Civil War. It's been a while since I've spoke about and seen Civil War, so thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's good to have you. Thank you again.
Yeah, I've Yeah, speak to you again. I've had a fantastic time. So I'd love to be love to be on again, whether it's horror or superheroes, what have you.
Uh, oh, definitely. Yeah, no, it's a great conversation. I'd love to have you on again.
Oh, thank you. Again, I'd love to be. I'd love to come on.
All right. Thanks again to Ollie for joining me. On Monday's episode, I begin a new series on the Saw franchise, and my first guest is none other than Ariel Power Shab, and we'll be tackling Saw 1 and 2. And on Friday, Kevin Urich returns to talk about Doctor Strange. Thanks for listening. Creepy and Geeky is a part of the Morbidly Beautiful podcast network. Please check out morbidlybeautiful.com/podcasts for more great shows. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving the show 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Also, please share the podcast on social media to help spread the word. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. Music for the podcast is Gratitude, composed by Jerry Smith. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and Blue Sky, and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more on TeePublic or by donating to the coffee page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.